Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on what time you are listening in at. I'd like to talk about unhelpful thinking. You're listening to CMG Talking. This is Catherine Gallagher. Now, often the conversations that I have at trainings, coaching, at talk sessions, when people come along and listen in, people often will ask me, how do I do more of or do less of? How can I not be or not feel a particular way? How can I not be so anxious? How can I not feel so low? How can I not be so stressed? And I'll go, oh my goodness, let's talk about that. Fundamentally, always comes down to our inner voice, our self-talk. How we address things, how we look at things, how we choose to look at things. And how we talk to ourselves, what we tell ourselves, points our brain in the direction and we get more of what we choose to look at. Does that make sense? If we live in our head, which we all do, and we're telling ourselves, I can't, I shouldn't, I won't, this won't, then that's what we're going to get more of. The can'ts, the won'ts and the shouldn'ts, and it won't. When I talk about the automatic thoughts that we all have, that automatically pop into our head, those automatic thinking processes that we do, if we don't catch ourselves with these negative thoughts that pop into our head, we can run away with them. That won't happen to me. Or it's okay for them. This always happens, works out for them. Or that's easy for you to say. The glib or the cutting things that we find ourselves saying, the pushing back, the negative things that come into our mind. If we don't catch ourselves saying these things that have become habitual, we just get used to doing them, then it's what we do and it's what our brain then learns. And that's what we continue doing, continue thinking. That's what we get more of. If you're interested in this subject and you want to know more, come along to some of my trainings. Send me a DM if you want to know when my next training is on this. Because it is very possible, of course it is, to be able to retrain our brain. But we have to be prepared to put the work in. And people often come to me and look for easy solutions, the quick fixes. And there's lots of gimmicks out there and there's lots of people take lots of money from you and tell you there's an easy way to do it. There isn't. We have to put the hard work in. We've perfected thinking negatively. We've practiced it. Practice, practice, practice. It's become our default. If you want to unpack that, we have to put the effort in. If you don't want to be self-sabotaging, if you don't want to be catastrophizing, if you don't want to constantly eliminate all the positives and only see the negatives, if you want to stop doing that, because our brain does mental fillers. Our brain gets overloaded and overwhelmed, so it sifts through information and we then shortcut and take out the gist, the crux of what the information is that's available to us. And often we hypothesize, we make guesses, we come to conclusions, we make assumptions. That's why I consistently say to people, if in doubt, check it out. How do you know? Well, it's obvious. Obvious. People say to me, they'll start off conversations, well, obviously. Obvious to who? It's not obvious to me. Well, clearly to who? We make these assumptions and judgments. Often to protect ourselves, it's a default and a defence mechanism. Catastrophizing, minimising. We minimise what's important because we don't really want to deal with it, we're avoiding, or because we just think, well, if we don't make it that important, then it's not such a big deal. But actually it is a big deal. We're procrastinating because we're putting it off and delaying it because we don't want to have to deal with it. All these unhelpful behaviours, unhelpful thinking processes, there's so many of them that we can do. So many of them. And we perfect them and we default to them. But all it does is keep us stuck. And being stuck prevents us making change, giving us certainty, allowing us to take action, take back control. And one of the things I'll often say to somebody is, how's that working for you? And they usually say, well, right now what's happening isn't working for me. And then the next thing I say is, well, something has to change. And they'll say, absolutely. And I'll ask, because I've got a 5 model of change that I developed about 30 years ago, which I use with my clients. And I'll say, okay, well, let's identify what you need to do. And you identify the process, and people often then, they know there's work they have to do, and they'll often then say, so what else can I do? And I'll say, you're avoiding putting the hard work in. You're deflecting. You're looking for other things instead of doing what we've identified you need to do. Put the hard work in to what we've identified you need to do, and you'll get the results. The results will come with the hard work. The hard work allows the results to follow. If we identify the behaviours and the thinking processes we're doing, we can then unpack it. If we write down what we're saying to ourselves, then our brain sees it and we can then unpack it. If we keep it in our heads, we ruminate and go over it, but it just keeps us stuck. It makes sense to write it down. Weigh up the pros and cons. Write down the pros and cons. Identify the first step and make change follow through. And see the results. Unhelpful thinking, here's a suggestion that I've just given you if you're stuck and want to make positive change. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep tuned. There's more to follow.